I want to start this off and just again say thank you for joining us, and just emphasize that this is just going to be a free flowing conversation, and I really want our viewers, they don't necessarily, all of them, have the pleasure of knowing you the way that both of us do outside of this, and so tell us a little bit about you and what made you want to become a county commissioner.
Let's see. So I grew up in East Salem, and I'm a graduate of McKay. Went to Waldo before that and Hoover before that. Before that, I went to 8 other elementary schools. I was born to a mother who had a fair amount of mental health challenges, addiction challenges when I was really little, and I think like most folks who are unstable in their mindset, they're running from something, and so we just followed along in that journey. And thankfully, I landed in Salem. I think I was around the age of 11. And the community here took her in a way, kind of accepted her for what she was. We navigated within the Native American community mostly while my mom was around. And so really supported by It Takes a Village concept. I navigated homelessness with her addiction with her, her mental illness. I have an older sister that participated in that. When I was in high school, she went to a powwow one weekend and didn't come back. And that thrust me into a different reality of life. I was blessed enough to be aware that if I could be a good enough kid, I wouldn't have to sleep on the street. So I navigated a lot of different couches and a lot of different homes through high school, sophomore, junior, and senior year. And I had some adults that invested in me. I had a softball coach that kept me on the team, even though I was definitely not a softball player. And a science teacher who just kept me in the building. And I think that happens a lot today in our community. We have a lot of adults that see kids for the challenges that they're facing without judgment and find a way to lean out into their space to try to help stabilize and love them up. Fast forward to 2018, I was a frustrated parent. I lived in Kaiser, and I was frustrated with the school district and the schools that my kids were attending, and I decided to run for the school board to have a parental voice present and really try to bring light to the fact that our schools were more institutionalized and less community classrooms, less grandmas, doing reading after school or moms doing math facts in classrooms. And I won that election, and then COVID hit and things became very hyper political. And I believe because I won that election and participated pretty aggressively in that education space as a parent, I caught the attention of some local leaders that essentially asked me to run for commissioner. It was never, ever on my horizon. I have actually been more negative towards politicians my whole life, probably because of my upbringing and the challenges that I faced and feeling like, why is the world set up the way that it's set up, and you must be responsible because you're the people in power. So I entertained the conversation in 2020, and actually former Commissioner Sam Bertano announced that I was running for me before I made the official decision, and so the cat's out of the bag, so I guess we're doing this. And I spent the better part of the next year campaigning to obtain the seat. And I'll be honest, it's one of the greatest blessings I've ever been gifted with. Being a county commissioner allows me the opportunity to play in this space where people's lives are changed. The county touches people's lives every single day in some fashion, whether it's public safety, healthcare, transportation, solid waste. I could go on. And the Board of Commissioners is the policy body. We get to set the tone as to how the county is going to function and how the folks that work for the county get to come to work into a space and design what the outcome should be. But I also have the opportunity of building and executing projects. And that's really where I think my heart lies, which is in really investing in the community, really figuring out where the issues are, connecting with the people, challenging them to the conversation, and really finding effective outcomes that meet the need. And so I've been doing it now 4 years, and it's been great. And I've had the opportunity to really impact folks' lives in a really healthy, dynamic way, from taking folks straight from Wallace Marine Park into housing to helping folks straight out of the penitentiaries into the community. It's just like the gamut is massive, and I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, so as you were sharing about your upbringing, one of the things that is often talked about is our unsheltered population. But I think one thing that is not talked about enough is our unsheltered population as minors. You know, you brought up with your story, coming to the understanding and the realization that if you were a good enough kid, that you could not end up on the streets. And not every young adult, young teenager is that smart, right? They don't have the wherewithal or the idea that if they do these things, they can avoid this. And we have a massive problem, not just here in Marion County, right? All over the nation.
Yes.
So what is it that the county is doing to help in that fight?
A lot. So a couple years ago, well, I'll start before I was a commissioner. About 7 years ago, there was a concept in the community to create a youth shelter. Today, that's called Taylor's House. That youth shelter was purchased by a bunch of community members, business owners, remodeled by business owners and volunteers to bring kids into a healthy, safe space so they could navigate life essentially on their own. Traditionally, kids that fail, they call them foster fails, kids that fail out of DHS, that DHS isn't equipped to take care of, end up on the street. And they're like discarded into the community, and they're hidden. They're the unseen, lost youth population. And in fact, in Marion County, we have many of them that are navigating the streets of Salem specifically. And Taylor's House is a 10-bed facility, 10-bed house that wasn't sustainable. It couldn't gain funding from the government to pay its bills because in Oregon we have these liability laws that prevent organizations and governments from sheltering kids without a jurisdictional charge from the court or whoever their guardian is. So they get lost in the space. Taylor's House had to convert to being a shelter for youth who couldn't be housed in a traditional foster home because of a variety of reasons, which then removed an opportunity for those youth to have a landing pad. So I got frustrated by that. I thought, that's not right. Marion County operates several programs through the juvenile department that really lean into helping youth prevent going into the criminal justice system. We have a very robust prevention program. We have a program called GAP that is a dorm-style setting building for youth that come. They have to create a contract with a probation officer. Even though they've never been in the criminal justice system, they get to work with these professionals that have expertise in youth navigation and accountability. But they have to maintain it their home school. But they dorm with us at the county. And they're on a case management plan. And it's a very successful program. A lot of those youth that are in GAP likely would fall into youth homelessness and or fall into the adult criminal justice system at some point. But we're able to kind of curb that and prevent it by wrapping around them in that system. We have another program called FSP, which is a family support program. That program is grant funded from federal dollars, and there's 2 positions that only fund support for kids, I think it's 7 to 13. And the family support program is a system of care that has the same staff, so probation officers working with parents on what is missing in this household to figure out why this kid is acting out, why this youth is on the wrong path. All this is pre-adjudication. All of it's based on referral from a community member, a counselor, a teacher, a law enforcement officer, a county commissioner. I've referred kids into it. And they can stay with us as long as they need to. The commissioners, at my request 2 years ago, agreed to navigate what I call a youth lead program. The law enforcement assisted diversion program that we have for adults works really well, and we need to have that for youth. And I recall you being at the table for that conversation when it first began. It's morphed some since then, but I was able to get funding to fund one full-time position that's focusing on Woodburn right now for that work. In fact, that staff person is getting their CADC right now because we want them to be able to lean into the addiction challenge that youth are facing. Those systems specifically are preventative for kids falling into homelessness. In addition to that, I've really started to advocate at the state level with the director of DHS and the governor herself and several legislators to create a law in Oregon that's called the Right to Shelter Act. And what that law essentially will do is it'll allow any youth, 17 and younger, who, for whatever reason, falls out of their home, to be able to access shelter anywhere that it's available, whether that's My Gap program at the county, whether it's another shelter in the community that could open up to care for youth. And within 72 hours, that youth would have to be required to be fully investigated as to their circumstance. It's true that there are kids in our community that are unsheltered, that are just really difficult, that don't want to follow the rules of their home, of their parents, and have conflict between themselves and their parents. That's not a circumstance where we should keep those kids in shelter. That's a circumstance where a service provider should lean in and help those parents with skills, whatever it may be, to help establish a better rapport and relationship with their child, to help maintain stabilization. And it's also true that there's kids that shouldn't be at home because home is really unsafe. Whether home left them or not, similar to my life, or just not being safe in their home, DHS doesn't have the capacity. That's a fact. It's in the news all the time where they're sheltering youth in hotels. A lot of those youth are no different than me. They could have navigated a home somewhere or a shelter of their own in the community if there was one available to them. Kids are pretty resilient. Unfortunately, they're kind of forced to be in a lot of poverty situations, which offers them a lot of skills. But we don't have the ability right now to bring those kids off the street because of these liability rules. And so this Right to Shelter Act concept will open up the pathway for organizations to come online to be able to provide support to those youth. But it takes a long time in Oregon for real policy that's real good to come about. So it won't come about in 2025, probably even or the short session of 26. I'm hopeful in 2027.
So when they go to this, what do you foresee this housing looking like?
Yeah.
Because I could see some people saying, hey, this is a great idea. It's getting the kids off the streets, giving them a safe place. But I can see the other side, the extreme opposite, saying this is just another institution to jail our kids.
Sure. So there's actually an organization at the moment I can't think of the name of that's in Kaiser right now that has purchased two houses that could essentially do this work. And it's made up of professionals. There's a QMHP, so a licensed therapist that's giving her time, a couple of mentors, and like a program coordinator. It's a place to land. First of all, it's not the streets. It's protecting kids from the dangers outside. And we don't probably want to get into right now what that looks like, but you use your imagination. And kids are being victimized by each other and others on the streets today. Providing them a safe shelter to go to is an opportunity for them to be seen by a safe adult, by a system of care that really needs to be thoughtful in public safety, which is law enforcement. Law enforcement doing an investigation within 72 hours into someone's home life offers a lot of opportunity. And also it can identify a lot of challenges that exist. And there has to be a referral handoff into a supported system of care for that kid. While that kid is being sheltered, they're not being harmed from what their perspective is. They're being seen and cared for. What permanency looks like past that, I think, is unique for every youth in that space. But ultimately, it's not a long-term environment. Shelters aren't meant to be long-term. They're meant to be transitional, very temporary to get you out of a dangerous situation. There's already a robust system now available to help youth in navigating, children's behavioral health as an example in the county. We do all kinds of service providing to kids that know about it, families that know about it, that can access it. But a lot of these youth that are navigating these adversities don't know what door to go into and what door they can trust if the door opens. And so essentially, I think it's just creating a safe environment with safe adults that are looked at by the government, that have to go through certain processes and regulations to be accessible to those youth, so that way they're not additionally harmed by either system trauma, which is real because systems constantly fail people, and or just by people who take advantage of vulnerable individuals.
So, and you said law enforcement would be responsible for doing the investigation of their background within 72 hours.
Yeah.
Is there going to be one department that in law enforcement that's in charge of it for Marion County, or is it going to be divvied up between, if you live in Kaiser, it's going to be Kaiser PD. If you live in Salem, it's going to be Salem. Where are these resources for that coming from?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The system has to be designed. Right now, we're in conversations with DHS. There's a program within the Department of Human Services that deals with at-risk youth who are homeless today, and they receive $1 million a year statewide to do this work. The gentleman that runs that program has raised a lot of red flags about this concept, which is why it's going to take us time, because you don't want to do anything like this with this population fast. In Marion County, there's likely a system internally that we will design to be responsive to this. For individual municipalities, I don't know, because there's not like money growing on trees being handed out for this type of work. What we do know is that there's a lot of money going into the Department of Human Services for foster care systems that are failing, and that money is being looked at right now really closely by the governor and the legislature to determine if it's being best utilized in today's society. So there will likely be resource allocations differently to systems of care around youth in the future. And as we build this program, I think those questions will be answered. The model that I pulled is from the state of Colorado, and Colorado built a whole program around this at the state level, and then found resources to pour into the local communities to make it successful. Oregon's system doesn't mirror Colorado's, but it does look to Colorado from time to time to create good programs.
I think it's an interesting dynamic as someone who does outreach for a living and has done so for a long time. And not only do I do it for a living, but I do it because it's a passion to reach out to those that are less fortunate, that are in need, to help them navigate services and resources. And the streets are beyond a nightmare for vulnerable populations. Whether you're an adult or a juvenile, it's an absolute nightmare. And right now there's nothing. And you brought up systems trauma. When we are out doing outreach, or I have someone from my team out there doing outreach, and they come into contact with the youth, there is not enough resources. There's not enough services. And when we're talking with youth, they look at you like it's pie in the sky when you say that there's help available, because they've been told that. Mm-hmm. And then they go and it's not, or it could be, but not right now. And it's really defeating. And then the workers that are there to do the work are so burdened with so much more work that the wraparound services that currently exist for adults do not exist for youth, at least not in comparison. I know that there is, but in comparison, there's nothing. And one of the things that you brought up is prevention, and we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on adult services, and not a fraction of that on youth. Is there anything that the county is trying to do different than the state when it comes to youth prevention in homelessness and addiction? Yeah.
So the way the county looks at prevention is we don't wait for the problem to exist. We look for the problems, and or when someone identifies there's a problem, we lead in to see if there's a way we can support. The county provides all kinds of services to parents. You know, we have the babies program, the women, infant, children WIC program. We have the children's behavioral health program. All of those programs have the ability to do prevention work. We also have an entire prevention team that has a ridiculous amount of money that's governed by the state. So we have state requirements that we have to perform to receive those dollars. And prevention to them really looks like having youth at the table. There's a program called I Lead that the county leans hard into that supports about 125 youth every year. They get to come here to Salem and navigate different systems. This year, the main topic this year is going to be gambling. And we're going to educate them on gambling and the harms of gambling and how that is an addiction. It can become an addiction and what happens if you lean into that from a recreation to a full-blown addiction. In that same I Lead program, it's a partnership with the city of Salem and several other nonprofits. They learn about money management and certain types of supported systems of care that exist in the community in case they might have something they need that they haven't identified to an adult. They can lean out to attach to that. We're constantly bringing youth into the discussion. My first year as a commissioner, I met with a bunch of youth from McNary High School who were really frustrated with the number of youth suicides that we were experiencing in the Salem-Keizer School District, which is a pretty high number over the last several years. This group of youth had a very creative take on kid interaction. We went as far as trying to design a game board that was similar to Monopoly with these youth from McNary and getting them in touch with Hasbro, the game owner of Monopoly, to not, copyright infringe so they could develop this suicide awareness game that they could take into middle schools and interact with kids. The county puts money behind outcomes, and it doesn't matter whose idea it was. If it looks like it'll produce results and there are motivated people to engage, we bring them into a system and have a conversation and figure out how we can make it come to fruition. But we're only serving a very small portion of the population. The county health department is traditionally only serving the Medicaid population, so for folks who are on the Oregon Health Plan. While we have a large portion of the Marion County population on the Oregon Health Plan, there's a large portion of the population that doesn't access our services. And so we work hard to partner with all the community-based organizations that want to be a partner with us to collaborate, share information, develop systems, and provide data. We're kind of the data collector at the local level when it comes to healthcare. And so we work really hard to make sure people know where the pain points are and help them lead in.
You mentioned earlier, and you've mentioned a couple times about at the county identifying problems and then coming up with ways or creative ways to solve those. My problems within the county are going to be different than Josh's or yours. So for the general public, how does the county decide which problems are going to be addressed and which ones aren't? Because some problems may seem really big, but they're not as big as others. So we don't get the topic of the month of the 31 flavors of, so to speak.
So Marion County doesn't serve problems, we serve people. And we don't care what your problem is. If you come into a door at the county and you identify a need, even if it's not us that's going to serve that, we're going to connect you to who does serve that. Our responsibility as the safety net organization in this community is to be responsive to the people who live here. It literally doesn't matter. I mean, that sounds kind of like, how can that be true? We have 1,700 employees in various service systems of care. The health department is the largest system of care. And every single person that works in the health department wants to help the person in front of them. I believe that wholeheartedly. I couldn't be more proud of the people that work in this county and the passion that they have for the people in front of them and the creativity that they come up with to serve people. I think Marion County is known statewide for our response because we don't work within a box. We work very well with our hospital partners, with our community-based organizations. We work hard to grow community-based organizations here in the community that fill a niche that we can't fill, that another population needs access to, that we can't serve. We'll figure out how to connect them and show them the path so they can be successful, so that population and service need can be delivered.
One of the things that I have to agree with you is that as a former employee of Marion County, and my wife is still an employee of Marion County.
Who I love, by the way.
And she loves you too. It's amazing the true compassion that is there within the employees to serve the community. Not one time have I ever heard my wife come home and say anything negative about the heart of her team behind what it is that they do.
And they have a lot of constraints, which is crazy.
Yes, they do.
Her team, just as an example of some crazy things that we deal with in the county, we have a young lady who has a developmental disability who, in theory, assaulted her uncle. She was cast out by the Department of Human Services and ended up in a juvenile detention center. While she was there, her family left the state and abandoned her to us in the juvenile department. And she has a developmental disability, which means she can't cognitively engage like other youth her age, and being in a space like that is already very difficult. It was actually a member of Josh's wife's team that happened to call me one day and just say, "This seems crazy that she's in juvenile detention, and I don't know if you know she's there." And of course, I didn't know she was there. I don't get a roster of everybody who's in detention or the jail, even though sometimes I think I should. So I leaned in and I looked into it. I called the juvenile director and said, "Tell me about this situation," and he informed me of it. And what I realized in that moment is that because she's incarcerated, she has no access to health care. Every benefit that she receives while she's incarcerated, just like people in jail, like adults in jail, comes from our general fund. And we had no program set up to support her in her needs while she was incarcerated because we'd never had a youth like her before. So she wasn't getting any services to help her succeed while she was in juvenile detention. And so I called our health administrator and said, "You have 5 days to figure this out, or I'm taking it to the commissioners because we're going to get her services." It took him 2 days, and that team fully engaged, and she's been receiving services successfully since, and will now be moving to the state of Idaho to a new program to stabilize near her family, who's accepted that she can stabilize and be healthy with proper supports. That's a win for us.
That's awesome.
And it's a total travesty that she fell through a crack because some government official somewhere said, when you're incarcerated, you shouldn't have access to Medicare or Medicaid. Like, what? And that's a big problem that we're facing, by the way, across the country, but for sure here in Oregon.
Yeah, and so, yes, that I know that that's true, what you just said about that individual and what you guys have done. But what I was trying to get to is that it's not just the employees at the county, it's all of you in the commissioner's office as well. And I had my own views of government prior to making changes in my own life. And when I got the opportunity to start the LEAD program with Paige Clarkson, our DA, I got to start to meet you guys in the commissioner's office. And the fascination that you all on the board have with the different programs that are helping people within the community is really interesting, because I'll never forget when you asked if you could go do street outreach. And I thought that was going to be just some 20-minute, get a feel, get a look of what's going on, and then be done. But you showed up in boots and pants and ready to go out and serve, and then spent extra time helping a young lady exit long-term homelessness.
Yeah.
And that was just really fascinating to see from you as a commissioner. But it's not just you, right? Commissioner Willis, Commissioner Cameron, all of you guys on the board, and that's commissioners before you as well. But it's just really neat to see the actual care from the top down, so to speak, within the county.
Well, I think the commissioners feel super important in the space of knowing, not just being told. Like, I need to really feel like what's happening. Not that I don't trust the people that I'm working with, I do. But I'm a very emotionally driven person. I literally just engage this work from my heart, and I don't always think about the process first. Thankfully, that hasn't harmed me yet in this job. But I need to see it and understand it. And I think not everybody who works for the county or works with the county has the most highest skill level of delivery of like what the challenge is. And if you can't really understand it, you can't really solve it. And every issue, especially with the unsheltered population, is so different. And it's so vast. I think, there's this narrative out there that because they're on the streets, they did something to get there, or they want to be there, or it's their mental health, or it's their addiction. But it's not that simple. And if I was just a politician sitting in a chair just making a decision, it would be a pretty shallow decision if I wasn't out there really experiencing and being exposed to the situation. I mean, we spend time in our jail. We talk to the folks that are in the jail, trying to figure out what recidivism looks like to certain people and why they keep coming back and what systems they accessed before and what are those gaps and how do we solve that. Because the last thing we want, the last thing what the community wants, is for folks to be in jail and to be burdening taxpayers. It's all very expensive. And the rest of us, I think everybody just wants to take their money and, live life comfortably. And we tax them quite a bit. Everybody feels very taxed these days. And we're not going to raise taxes in Marion County, so we have to understand what the real issues are so we can really solve them effectively and really frugally. And we do that pretty well. And we do that with our community partners, like our reentry program. Folks come every year to this reentry breakfast that we have in Kaiser and write checks to a program. And for a while I thought, do they even know what they're doing? Like, do they really know what that money is going towards? And it turns out they do. They realize that those dollars are going to help, with the cell phone bill or the down payment for the rent or the background check or whatever small hurdle it is that individual needs to get over, to get stabilized so they can be a healthy contributing member of the society that we're in, is what those folks are paying for in reentry. So we invest in it as much as we possibly can with our parole and probation dollars, because we don't want people to be in jail or prison, because it costs a lot of money.
Yeah, that's always the fun part of this, right, is the tax dollars. I mean, I pay taxes. I don't want my taxes to go up. Yes. I realize the services need to improve, but I don't want to pay more money to make them improve. Yeah. So it's really important for a lot of the people that are more fortunate in our community that do step up, and bless their hearts for actually stepping up and giving money to pay a cell phone bill so somebody can get in contact with a prospective employer. Yeah. Because we need them to be positive influences and be positive people in our community, as opposed to being a drag and reoffending and going back to jail.
It's also important for government to not just keep doing things the same way, because we've always done it that way. And I really appreciate Marion County being an organization of individuals who are creative and flexible. Change is hard, doesn't matter where it is. And I know there's employees in the county right now that wonder what it is I'm going to come up with next to look at what they're doing and how we can improve it or cancel it. And it doesn't mean I'm canceling them. It just means I'm canceling whatever it is that they're doing that's not working. Constantly reinvigorating these systems to accommodate the people that we're serving. We just went through and did a a deep dive into the health department. And 2 years ago, I asked our health administrator to look at the number of people that were on our case management plans and how long they'd been there. I have experience with this system of care. My mom was a client of the Marion County Health Department for a really long time, and she needed that care. But there are people who stabilize that the system, because it's so archaic, the way government systems run, they don't, like graduate folks off of our client base, which then it means it doesn't open up room for new people. And we did a full audit, and we were able to release like 800 clients from our system of care, which was huge, and it kind of felt scary at first. But it wasn't like we were saying to those folks, like, you can't ever come back. Like, we're here for you. If you need us, you come back. But we haven't served you for X number of months or years, therefore we're gonna open this up for somebody who's in need today. That hadn't actually ever happened in the county before. Counties just like don't do that. The state doesn't do that because they want to be available to everybody all the time. But we only have so many dollars, and we have to hold those dollars for those slots. And so it's important that those slots remain active for whoever has the current need today. And we were able to open up our wait list and bring in a whole bunch of new people and modify our children's behavioral health program. I believe we're the only county in Oregon today that can serve a youth same day if they call and need access, whether that's addiction treatment or mental health treatment. That's really big for our community, and it's made a substantial improvement in relationships, especially with their parents. When parents have a child who is in need, they need to be served today, not in a week or 2 weeks from now. And it helps kids stabilize in their homes, and it helps reduce a lot of the challenges that they were facing in their community.
Okay, you're gonna have to forgive me. It's been about a year since I've worked. Okay, but when I worked the streets, there was countless times where we had kids in need of mental health stuff. Parents needed resources, and there was nothing for us to do with them. So when you say that we're able to get them help that same day, from my perspective, doing the job for close to 30 years, that's not the case.
Right.
So where's that disconnect?
So first of all, people have to know where to call. That's that what door do you go through? Any door is the answer. People have to know that they should call. And we only serve the Medicaid population, which is a problem for a good portion of our population that receive, we serve Oregon Health Plan patients, clients. The commercial industry for mental health care is very taxed in availability. We don't have enough providers, period, in any system of care. But if you're on the Oregon Health Plan and you live in Marion County, you can be served same day. That has been a system for a full year. So maybe you retired and we brought that online. But it doesn't matter. We'll take the call from anybody. So anybody can call our 24/7 crisis hotline, which we just rebranded to the Behavioral Health Crisis Center, and we're remodeling a new building. We're going from a single wide to a triple wide, essentially. Like, we're tripling the size of our building and relocating it. And we have a specific area serving youth in that building that's open 24/7, 365 days a year. So any youth in Marion County and any parent can go there and be seen immediately. It's not the emergency room. It's Marion County Behavioral Health. And even if they're not on the Oregon Health Plan, we can still serve them and connect them to resources outside of the county system. And also what's called the Psychiatric Crisis Center. I'm sure you're familiar with PCC. It's been around for like 28 years. It's the worst hidden secret in Marion County. It's super frustrating to me as a commissioner that people don't know about it. And it's because government doesn't market itself like a business. I own a business. I ran a chamber before I was a commissioner. And you don't just get to come in and turn the open sign on and hope people know you're there. You have to market. So through our rebrand, we're doing a whole marketing campaign countywide to help people understand that facility is open and available to them. And we just, we'll essentially want partners to push it and advertise it, and we'll be available to respond. We also have units that respond out of that facility, our MCRT team, our lead team.
Yes, but that's not necessarily the exact type of help, because I worked with MCRT for a number of years because it's been around for quite a while. And it was very frustrating from a point of view where they would rarely come, where there was only 1 or 2 units on, and they would be tied up with one, and we couldn't get help to other people.
Well, you're going to be super frustrated to hear that we went from 4 teams to 1 thanks to the state of Oregon.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get that we need to serve everybody, and this is where I push back just a little bit. Is you said prior to what you're doing, it was Medicare, Medicaid people that were going to get same-day service if they called the right place. Well, how is that, to use today's terms, equitable to the rest of the community that pays taxes, pays for those services, and needs that help, but they can't get into it or couldn't get into it because maybe they had a job that had some insurance, but maybe it wasn't quite enough, and because they were on insurance, they can't get into a facility because for whatever reason.
Well, if I could solve that problem myself, I would. It's not a commissioner problem to solve. It's a state problem to solve.
Sure.
The governor, the Oregon Health Authority director, and the legislature need to be responsible and fix that. The system of care that I run is gifted to me by the state. The Oregon Health Authority, through a statute, gives county commissioners the right to choose to be the local mental health authority, and Marion County accepts that responsibility wholeheartedly. We are governed by statute who we can serve, and we are gifted money from the Oregon Health Authority to serve that population. Equally, the CCO, Pacific Source, which is the Medicaid insurance company that's local to Marion County, we have a contract with them, and we negotiate that every 2 years, and they give us a certain amount of money to perform services for their population, which is also the Oregon Health Plan population. I can't as a commissioner go outside of those contracts, but what I can do is continue to argue and advocate at the legislature and to the governor, who are acutely aware of the challenges that we have in this state. They just have to be brave enough to fix it. And the reality is that it's broken. Our insurance system is broken. Our healthcare system is broken. There's a ton of waste occurring at the state level through the Oregon Health Authority. Hospitals are starting to fail and go upside down in costs because doctors are making a whole lot of money, a lot of money. There's not enough doctors to come in to fill additional seats to provide service to additional clients. The CCOs through the Oregon Health Plan won't pay a market rate for that doctor's service, so they'll only see so many patients. Like, the system is complicated and it's a giant train wreck. Oregon is not alone, just to be clear. Like, this is an issue in every state in the country, but it can be fixed here locally. Like, the governor can figure this out if it's her priority.
I think a lot of our state elected officials need to make things their priority and start doing what they promised to do rather than sitting back and arguing for political sake.
I agree with you 100%. I also think that the folks that are elected to the legislature really don't even understand how the systems work in state government because they've never worked in the system, they've never worked with the system, and they've never had to write a check into it other than paying taxes. Because they don't have the education, it's difficult for them to know how to fix it. We do have some very aggressive, very informed legislators trying to figure this out. Representative Kevin Mannix is one of them. Representative Ed Deal is one of them. Senator Kim Thatcher. These are individuals that represent my community here in Marion County, are very loud and aggressive about the broken systems, specifically around healthcare in Oregon. And they happen to be in the super minority. And it's a very partisan political environment. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And while I do believe that there are some Democrats in the legislature today who are interested in fixing some of the challenges that we face in healthcare, they also have other priorities, for whatever they told their district they were going to do when they got elected or whatever agenda they came into office with. And since we don't have cohesiveness in that space, it just isn't going to get fixed.
And it's unfortunate for everybody.
Yes, it is unfortunate for everybody.
Yeah, Oregon is rated 51st in the nation for access to mental health services.
Yeah.
And last time I checked, I'm not a math guy, but there's only 50 states.
Right.
So rated 51st says something. And then, we're rated 50th in the nation for access to addiction treatment services. And even with the allocation of $288 million through Measure 110, we were able to, in all fairness, we were able to do and add quite a bit of access to services. I'm really thankful for the behavioral health resource networks that I am involved in across the state, including right here in our county. And so I know firsthand the access that it has created. But I think that a lot of people in that have been caught up with the legalization component of Measure 110. And hyper fixated on that. And now that we have, Senate Bill 4 or House Bill 4002, which is, I testified in front of legislature to help make that happen with the recriminalization component. We still have to have financing to continue to support the growth that happened in the state of Oregon for access to care. Because if that goes away, we don't just go backwards, we go to the dark ages, right? So how here in our county are you guys managing what is currently going on in the state around Measure 110 funding, which I know some of the agreed to fund programs has happened, but they're going to go through and cut a bunch of it. And then with the deflection money through House Bill 4002, how is the county here navigating through that?
So I assume you're familiar with the recent allocation from Marion County through the OAC last week, the burn money. We're not happy about that. Marion County is, the county as a whole is receiving an $8 million cut to addiction treatment services. So we're right now navigating if we lay people off in addiction treatment services in the county. Bridgeway received a substantial cut. They funded a couple of Portland-based organizations that I'm fighting against to bring that money back into the community. Not that I have anything against those organizations. I think they're great for Portland. They should focus on Portland. The burn network that we created here offers the opportunity for anybody who's navigating addiction here in this community to go knock on a door and get treatment today, right now, in person. Not have to wait to do a telehealth appointment with somebody from the state of Colorado and or drive to Portland for a treatment appointment up there, because that's just crazy. So I have a lot of feelings about the recent process and the harm that's going to come to my community members because of that. And I'm very aggressively advocating with my legislators and my peers in Polk County to have the OAC do another review of those grant applications that came in. And I think that the bill should be reviewed and make sure that burn money that's allocated to the county must be given to people who operate in the county. So there's that. I think there's going to be a lot of harm to come to this system that's been very successfully stood up and very collaboratively, and it was the first in the state to be able to execute that collaboration of partners. Ideal Options is at the table. I'm pretty concerned about what we're going to do there. I'm also equally concerned that the legislature sees a lot of unspent money statewide in the burn networks, and they think that because that funding is unspent, there's people who don't need it, which is totally false. The reality is that every day since the burn network came online and our system of care was designed and stood up with the doors open, people were coming into those service systems to receive services. And it still takes time for people to want to accept recovery and sobriety and to come into treatment. So we have this gap of these unused dollars in certain areas. And it can't be perceived that because there's funding available, that funding isn't needed. It just, what the reality is that we have to educate the legislature that it takes time. And we have to follow a very human forward approach to that time. People are going to start and stop and start and stop until one day they're going to be really successful at it, and whatever that looks like is measured on the individual. But we're going to be harmed here in the very near future if I can't be successful at that ask of having a review done. On the House Bill 4002 funding, we did some pretty creative things. As you know, Marion County already had a deflection program, which we called diversion, through the LEAD program, which you started with the district attorney. So we just enhanced our program. We added additional LEAD officers, navigators, and then we added a sergeant, a sheriff to that team to do direct street outreach with the navigators to build that relationship.
Who's awesome, by the way.
He is awesome.
He is awesome.
Yeah, he believes in community policing, and I'm thrilled that he does. We also worked with the district attorney's office and the circuit court to create a new specialty court, which we call Restore Court. And I can't remember what it stands for, but it has something to do with your expungement. So it's like restoring your life through expungement. If you are charged with, essentially could be charged with a misdemeanor, and because you're found in possession or use of narcotics, now illegal, you have the option of going into treatment, or you can go to jail. We are offering people treatment, and if they succeed at treatment, then their record can be expunged. We're navigating all of that through a specific court, and we needed to do that because we needed the full system of care available through the justice system, which means we needed a judge, we needed a defense attorney, we needed a prosecutor, we needed the behavioral health team, and we needed the accountability team, which is our lead navigators. And so the district attorney and her chief deputy district attorney designed this whole new court system, and it got kicked off, I think, in mid-September. And it's slowly working, but we have about 1,000 people on a docket, misdemeanor style docket, that need to go through court to be held accountable for their crimes that are drug-induced crimes. And so our district attorney chose to look at that docket and start moving those people through who have been sitting on it for a year or 2 or 3, being held unaccountable for the crime that they committed, which means there's a victim in the community who's not receiving any type of restitution or justice. So we're slowly moving through that. And we've had to make some tweaks to the program because it's brand new. It's never been done before. There wasn't a lot of interest by those folks that were sitting on that list of 1,000, because they're like, we've not been held accountable this whole time. Maybe this doesn't matter. And so District Attorney Clarkson kind of flexed a little at some of them and said, okay, well, we're not going to expunge your record. We're just going to prosecute you. And then all of a sudden, some of them were interested. So it's slowly starting to work. It takes a long time to get programs going in government, unfortunately. And I'll just be honest, it's not working the way I wanted it to. I'm very frustrated. I was frustrated when I testified with the legislation last February, and I'm more frustrated now, specifically because people just don't take it seriously. You know, some do, but the mass has not. I mean, we've seen, I think, 2 referrals into treatment from that system here in Marion County. That's obviously not what the community expected when the recriminalization and the accountability effort came forward. The community expected that folks would be held accountable and that there would be some, flex of the law behind that. And it's not. And we knew it wouldn't be as accountable as we had hoped for. We just hoped it would be a little more than it is. So we're going to have to navigate that. We're all going to go before the legislature sometime in April, and we're going to report in and tell them the successes and the challenges and the failures, and ask them if they're willing to, stand up a little more for the vulnerable populations, the victims that they create in this community, and create some more accountability. But so far, that conversation hasn't kicked off.
Yeah, so I was advocating for the Class C component, because that's 1 year, and that's a good chunk of time out.
Agreed. Me too.
And that's a motivating factor, right?
Yeah.
However, going back to the when you were talking about it's going to take time, right? And the fact that they're talking about removing the amount of money that they're talking about. We had Measure 110 for 4 years.
Right.
So for 4 years, there was zero accountability, none. you can't just flip the light switch on and think that because you now say there is, that everybody's going to just be like, oh, okay, I'm ready to change then. Like,
Right.
I will now engage. When they had 4 years of getting a ticket and having no accountability, to now getting whatever that looks like and possibly accountability when they end up with a failure to appear and then have to be taken in, right? And the House Bill 4002 has some parameters around what that looks like, but that does take time. That kicked off September 1st, right? So we're still not that far into the game for people to really have. But the community is expecting what they're expecting, and I think it's because of bad publicity and a real, the spin doctor, right? Like, we're going to spin this information to create hysteria and have people watch our news channel because they get fed whatever it is that they get fed.
Another one of the issues, though, that I think is important to be aware of is that while we had 4 years of Measure 110, which, took that drug-induced population way out of control. I mean, I can't quote the numbers today, but it's massive. I mean, I want to say it like tripled or quadrupled, and people were using it outside. You were seeing it everywhere. In that same 4-year period, the cost of doing business, it escalated. So as a government, I'm thinking about, Rodney, he's a former law enforcement officer in Kaiser. You all are expensive. Cops cost money, a lot of money, rightfully so. We need more of them to have the accountability, and we can't afford them. We don't have enough officers in any jurisdiction in this state to have that accountability perspective present today to be as reactive as the community wants.
So
we also don't have enough jail beds.
So as someone who spent time in prison and used to run from them often, I don't think in society today that you could double the amount of money that you were paying him before he left and retired. I don't think you could offer that in society today and have people jump to want to be a cop, right? We've gone through such crazy times of people wanting to defund the police and just really anti-judicial anything. I don't really know that we could offer an amount of money to have people that are willing to take the position with integrity that deserves to be there behind the badge, right? And that's really unfortunate because my life is different today because of law enforcement, right? Yes, I was rescued, not arrested, by Sean Bennett the night that they took me down, but it took time for my point of view to change, and we want good human beings like that behind the badge, right? But they show up now and everybody wants to point a camera at them because they're doing a traffic stop, and it becomes unsafe. So it's a difficult situation.
We do
also
have,
for them.
there is a mindset change happening. I mean, I'm not going to speak for any officer, but I can speak as a commissioner because I'm highly invested in recruiting with our sheriff for the positions we have in the county. And while we're not recruiting as fast or as many as we would hope, we are recruiting some really high quality candidates. I mean, if you pay attention to the sheriff's Facebook page, you see the number of drug busts and guns were taken off the streets with some really, really amazing young guys from East Salem. Maybe they're doing so well because they know where their peers live and who are doing the crimes. I haven't, I don't know. But the reason I made that point is because the community is frustrated. They've been frustrated. I'm frustrated. And they're impatient because they want their livable space to be healthy and thriving and clean. And even if we had all the money, we have to get the people. Right. And we have to have the places. I appreciate the creativity of the state, not like the state organization, but like the mindsets of the people that live here that people should go to treatment, not jail. I fully appreciate that.
Jail's relevant though.
Yeah. I think we kind of hit on this a little bit. Jail is relevant, and we've talked about this in past episodes. But with the programs that you've spoken about, I think from former law enforcement perspective, and from stuff we learned from Ron Williams, when 110 was implemented, and became law, the programs weren't set up and established.
That's right.
And now we're going to 4002, and we still don't have those programs established necessarily, or the things to get the ball rolling, so to speak. It's almost like when legislation is enacted, there needs to be, okay, it's passed, it's going to be implemented next year. We're going to take a full year to get all this process stuff lined out and ready to go before we make these changes, because one, law enforcement line guys don't like change. So it takes time to train them and to get them up. So to get buy-in from everybody that's going to be doing this, I think things would go a lot smoother if these new programs and stuff are actually set, ready to go, where there isn't any other, yes, there's going to be kinks, but everything is in place and ready to go so that the money's just not being wasted.
Yeah, it's kind of like the crystal ball theory. You should be able to look ahead to know what to do. I first of all, I voted no on Measure 110. It never should have happened. I do not think that any person in this state that voted for it thought what they were voting for is what happened. I just don't. There's not a person that I've talked to, and I've talked to many, that when they voted for treatment over jail, they thought it was going to let people do drugs on the street and then nothing.
I think they probably thought what House Bill 4002 is more of what, along the lines of what they were voting for.
I think so-ish. I think that people, Marion County led the 4002 effort. Our DA, myself, our sheriff, you, other participants of our CBOs were very aggressive navigating the leadership of the legislature in that session last year to get where we are. And we worked really hard for the compromise that we have, because what the Democrats wanted originally was much more lenient than what we have today. And what the Republicans wanted is much more aggressive than what we have today. We didn't really hit a middle road with our current 4002 legislation, but at least it's a start. And the diehard optimist in me hopes that common sense will prevail someday. And the folks that believe in a right to fail, this theory that you have a right to fail in life, will see that folks that are choosing that are choosing it out of sickness, and that they're dying because of their sickness, and that's not humane and that's not compassionate. It's just wrong. And someone's going to have to hold them accountable, and those someones are the supermajority Democrats in the Oregon legislature, who really need to understand that compassion sometimes is really accountability, and that's not forever. And it's also doesn't have to be prison. We are creating a program with our Restore Court and our other resources. We've closed our transition center, our jail transition center. We've shut it down, and we're redesigning it to be a space of accountability for our cities. So municipal courts will be able to send individuals there for a weekend. Right now, city courts can't do anything. You break a crime in a city, unless it's jailable offense, you're basically getting off with we'll see you in court, here's your notice. And small communities need accountability too. So our stabilization center is what we're calling it. We'll be able to help those municipalities with troublemakers in their communities that just need a timeout for a bit. It will continue to serve the hardest to serve population, the level 3 sex offenders that are coming out of prison who can't get housing. They'll still, thrive through there until they can get placed. And it will also serve this 4002 population and our pretrial court population with an accountable arm. We have 144 beds in our stabilization center, and every month last year we were only filling 50 or 60 of them. It was a wildly underutilized system of care, and Sheriff Hunter was this is unacceptable. We need to be using this system, and we need to be holding people accountable. In fact, we just had a work session about it yesterday to go through the budget and really understand who will be served there. And it's a locked facility. Sometimes those individuals that under 4002 that say they want to go into treatment but they fail out, maybe need to go spend a few nights in the transition center. It's a locked facility, but it's not a jail cell. But it's not letting you YouTube your life away, and you're not hanging out at your local tavern. There's accountability to it. And everybody that's going to work in there, minus the supervisors, will be leaning into supported services of care. It'll be individuals who are going to go through DPSST and become certified in corrections, but they will not be deputies. And their mission will be to connect to mental health, addiction health, whatever services those individuals need to get them on a path of stabilization and restoration. And we're hoping to open it later this year.
So is this facility going to be something where somebody will have committed a crime? Maybe it's drug induced, maybe it's because of mental health issues. Yeah. And it's a pretty low level crime, but the officers are just constantly arresting them every day. They can go.
Court can put them there.
So they got to wait for the court to.
Well, I mean, essentially, they can be. You know how the jail works. We have Senate Bill 48, and we have this release matrix. We want the most egregious crimes in the jail, but the folks that you're describing, which are the ones that just need a timeout, essentially can go there. There's a process. I have no idea what that process looks like. The sheriff could tell you about it, and maybe you should have him here so he can talk about it because it's really fascinating. But the answer to your question is yes.
That's fantastic because
yes.
I mean, I remember looking business people, in the eyes and say, sorry, all I can do is give them a ticket because the jail wouldn't accept somebody who's been trespassing and stealing from the store 15 times in the last week.
But why wouldn't we accept them?
That's up to.
It's up to the presiding judge and the Supreme Court Justice in Senate Bill 48. What's super important for people in the community to know is that law enforcement wants accountability, and the folks that run that jail also want to receive individuals to hold them accountable. But there was a bill passed that tied the hands of our circuit court and our sheriff to be able to put people in jail even for low-level crimes. We have remedied that by being able to open up, like our G-pod, we just opened up, our jail is fully accessible. Every pod is open. We funded that 3 years ago. We had to get the bodies in there. When we closed the transition center, we moved all the deputies in there and G-pod open. It's been functioning. It's great. So now we have our full functioning jail, which we could double in size probably for the size of our population and still need more beds. But we don't want to put folks that are doing the basic trespassing and or these low-level crimes in the jail because we need to get the murderers in there. The transition center, which is the stabilization center, in theory, they could go there.
Well, and I misspoke, but my point is you would go someplace, arrest the person, and we couldn't even take them to the jail for processing purposes, right. Fingerprints and photographs, and give them a couple hours or more to kind of reset before they went back and caused more trouble. Yeah. And that's where the frustrating part was for law enforcement and for a lot of members within the community. Yeah. It sounds like this might be a step going back in the right direction.
It is. And also, under Sheriff Hunter, the local jurisdictions have a more open relationship with the jail. So, like, if you were out on the beat still and you had an individual that you really felt like needed to go, you can call for an override. And
yes, you could. It didn't always happen.
Right.
As opposed to when I started, in the early 90s, everybody went to jail and got processed and then got released if they didn't meet the criteria to stay overnight. But that changed, especially with COVID. Yeah. And I get the reasons behind that with COVID. But then when COVID was over, we kind of stayed at that for a while, and it got better right before I left. But we stayed at that for a while, and it was very frustrating to not only law enforcement but to the community. So I'm happy to hear that Sheriff Hunter is doing this, and that there's maybe, some light at the end of the tunnel for some accountability.
He is very active we have 13 law enforcement jurisdictions that serve Marion County, from state police down to all the cities. And he works with all the chiefs and talks to all the guys all the time, and gals. And I really appreciate his responsiveness to try to be providing a service that the community expects through that accountability arm. The stabilization center, there's only one other like it is in Washington County, and we went and toured it as a group, and we mirrored a lot of our programming off of theirs. It's different because it's our style, but I think it'll be great. I think that I think small communities will see the impact first. There was a situation that kicked off in Staten a couple of months ago where a guy went on a complete tirade the entire day. Started before 7 a.m., ended up getting arrested finally at like 4:30 p.m., and he was all over the community. He was having a complete mental breakdown and disrupting. And, it wasn't like we wanted him to go to jail, but he was being totally disorderly, and he was violating all kinds of different laws. And Staten PD was like, they're not going to take him to jail. And they were right, because he hadn't committed a crime, like a crime that we could keep because of Senate Bill 48. So what they ended up doing is putting him on a hold at the hospital, a 72-hour hold. This gentleman in that situation can be treated a little differently going forward in partnership with the sheriff's office. And I'm sure it won't be perfect to start, and I know it will be slow to start up because we don't want to just open the doors and fill 144 beds and then be reactive. But I'm looking forward to being able to provide that level of accountability and additional access to the community.
When looking at some of the things that are going on, we talked about unsheltered. We have a lot of programs in this community for shelter beds and housing first models. I have my own point of views on some of those accesses to shelters. Okay. Right now, there's a big push within the recovery community for more recovery houses. So things
like more Soaring Heights?
Just like Soaring Heights, okay. Right? Oxford houses, Soaring Heights, things like that. However, there's a lot of pushback from cities around, and some counties around what that looks like. And it's made it very difficult. Very difficult. So what is it that the county here in Marion County is doing to do that, right? Because we have lots of proof that taking people from being unsheltered for long periods of time who struggle with substance use or mental health disorders and just putting them into long-term housing is not effective. Right. It has unfortunate things happen to, units. Right. And so having kind of like a stair step to get to that.
I call it the escalator of housing.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is the county doing to help out in that?
So, boy, other than funding the last 3 Soaring Heights homes, we believe in that model. We believe in the transitional housing model with accountability. And the word accountability has really been weaponized, so I'm reluctant to use it in public spaces because folks immediately think that it's like harsh. There's different, it's just like harm reduction has been weaponized and also abused considerably by some jurisdictions. Marion County performs harm reduction in our behavioral health system of care, and love it or hate it, it's a evidence-based system for our county that we deploy. We are constantly looking for ways to connect and engage our community members. The folks that live on the streets are members of our community. They're our neighbors. They're just really unhealthy. Most of them, not all, most of them don't want to be on the streets anymore. And a lot of them don't have the skills to be able to move into an apartment today and be successful. Not because they don't know how to use a toilet or shut a door or turn off a light, mostly because they don't know how to be by themselves. They're out in a community when you're on the streets. While you're alone, you're not just alone, right? Like how do I describe it? Like your soul is alone, but you're very occupied by people around you, so you're constantly on alert. The supported system of care ideally would be with those people through every phase, from them leaving the street into a tiny shelter to a cohabitated transitional home to a permanent home of their own, if that's what they can succeed at. We are working hard to invest in that escalator of system. We partner with Soaring Heights and a few other community partners to help them bring on those residences. Unfortunately, Kaiser is the only community so far in Marion County that's been open to Soaring Heights. I believe the city of Salem in the near future will be open to a Soaring Heights type model. I think it's just a mindset. I think that there's also a stigma around some of these homes because they're run by people of faith. There's this assumption that you have to accept some faith or Christ or engage in that type of narrative in order to live in those homes. And that's just not true. It's just not true. And so we have to work hard to communicate kind of against that stereotype and stigma to help folks appreciate and understand that just because the person who operates the home has a deep faith doesn't mean they require the individuals who live in the home to have a faith at all. Like, you just don't. And we're engaging in other ways to increase housing. The Board of Commissioners is the board for the Marion County Housing Authority, and we are actively working to bring on more units for supported housing. And supported housing isn't like we provide services on site. It's just a home that has access to services. We're remodeling a complex in Woodburn to increase units and take it out of a current funding stream that's really restrictive to the main population in need. We're also looking at purchasing some property and some units in Mount Angel. And we just invest with partners as much as we can. And next month in March, we will be opening a 12-unit apartment complex in partnership with Catholic Community Services called Our Place, which is a big deal for me. When I became a commissioner, I learned about a program called Her Place, which is a transitional home for mothers navigating their addiction, and they can have their children with them. It's a pretty big deal. We've been operating it for 25 years in Marion County. And I asked the question, what about dads? Are dads important too? So a year and a half ago, we opened His Place, and now we'll open Our Place. And so we're just looking for partners to try to find access to partnerships to invest for stabilization services, and we're educating our elected colleagues in counties and cities around the successes these programs have and why they're important to invest taxpayer dollars in. The Soaring Heights model is really successful for us here in this community. The number of individuals that they've had excel through their program and stabilize into permanent housing and get jobs and go back to school and receive their children back and become healthy contributing members of this community is profound. Those individuals are on a short-term benefit of government, right? Because they're choosing themselves and we're leaning into them, giving them a hand up, not a handout. And they're paying taxes. That's what everybody wants, right? So, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question entirely, but we're also working with another community partner who runs a really big multi-family complex in North Salem that essentially doesn't make anybody move out once they've moved in, regardless of their income. It's a wildly subsidized system of care. A lot of those folks want the same American dream that you and I want. They just don't have the education and haven't been provided the right direction or access to achieve it. We are leaning in to provide those individuals access to financial education, to be able to maybe be a homeowner. And maybe they can't go buy like a single family home, maybe they can buy a condo. Are there enough condos available? The answer is no. We work with the Home Builders Association to find developers to go build condos to get those people to elevate into housing. We also have a program in the county that invests in owner-occupied housing. We have a down payment assistance program that we navigate federal funding with, and we can offer folks who are elevating out of poverty access to a down payment so they can purchase their own home, which is a really big deal for the economic gain in our community. So we just try to find creative ways to help people stabilize.
That's fantastic.
Do you have any more questions?
No, I don't.
He's like, this is going on forever. I could talk to you for hours.
I know you can. I'm sitting over here getting leg cramps and trying not to stand up in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, I'm super thankful that you agreed to do this. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I appreciate being here and in the conversation. I think we have to do more of this. I think this type of interaction through podcast is how people learn. It's less intimidating than listening to me when I'm sitting on a dais, governing a county. And so I just appreciate the access, and maybe I'll come back and talk about whatever comes next in life, whether it's a new project or who knows.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get you on the golf course.
Okay, as long as there's no cameras, I'm game.